Begone, dull care. Fire shall have its will of thee. Begone, dull care. And all the winds make merry with thy doubts. Hail, fellowship's eternal flame. Once again, midsummer sets us free.
Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit. I am your host, Eric Dwinells, and you might be wondering what you were just listening to. Of course, we're going to get to that in just a little bit, because tonight we are talking about the mysterious Bohemian Grove and the controversy surrounding it, and some of the conspiracy theories around it as well. Before we dive into that, I want to, of course, remind you to check out the show's webpage, where you'll find every episode of Spooky AS, and you specifically to this episode, you can find pictures and some video links that I'm going to post. You can also find links to our social media pages. We are at Spooky Ass Shit on Instagram and Twitter, and we are on Facebook at facebook.com/spookyas, and I do hope that you will join us there. And hey, while you're at it, it is Thanksgiving time. I would give thanks if you could share the show with your friends and give us some good reviews on iTunes or Stitcher or YouTube, wherever you happen to listen to the show. We always appreciate the positive feedback and try to learn from it and grow as well. So if you could do that, that would be wonderful, Spookaroos. Now, I don't want to waste any time, because I originally thought when I picked this topic, I said, well, this will be kind of a light episode because there's really not too much to say about it, and I can kind of get in, get out. That was my thinking. Turns out that's not exactly the case. So I've got a lot to cover here. So we're going to dive right into Bohemian Grove. Spookaroos, what if I was to tell you that there's a place in Northern California where every year in July, 2,000 of the most powerful men in the entire world meet to perform strange pagan rituals, engage in acts of sexual depravity, and perform human sacrifice? Now, of course, your first thought, if you're a rational person, is to say, well, I would say that's all bullshit. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is mostly bullshit, but not as much as you might think. Let's start with the facts. Yes, there really is a Bohemian Grove. And yes, there really is a Bohemian Club. And it really does cater to the most powerful men in the world. It is an all-men's club. The Bohemian Grove is the name given to a 2,700-acre campground located near a town called Monrio, California. The Bohemian Grove belongs to a group called the Bohemian Club, which is actually based out of San Francisco, California. The club was originally formed by some artists living in the area all the way back in 1872. 6 years after the club's formation was when the tradition of the summer encampment began. This was because an actor known as Harry Edwards, he was a stage actor, and he was one of the founding members of the Bohemian Club. He decided that he was going to move to New York City to further his acting career. So on June 29th, 1878, there was slightly under 100 Bohemian Club members gathered in the woods to camp and have a goodbye party in Edwards' honor. They drank a lot of beer, they hung up some Japanese lanterns to put some lights on the festivities, and the club members camped around the redwood trees in the area. Now, this encampment proved to be so much fun that the Bohemians made it a yearly tradition, and over the years, they were able to buy up some of the acreage until eventually they had all 2,700 acres of what is now known as Bohemian Grove. They were able to do this because instead of just letting artists and musicians in, they eventually let in, society people, and this meant businessmen and politicians. And over time, those people had more money, so they had more influence, and they were able to help the club buy things. And now they still let in artists. They call them men of talent, and they actually get a discount on their membership, which is quite pricey, by the way. And this way they have built-in entertainment. They don't have to hire some outside people because certain members will perform for the so-called Bohemian, not so much Bohemian anymore. But we'll get into exactly what kind of people are members in modern times a little bit later on. Now, on the site of Bohemian Grove, 2,700 acres, that's an awful lot. And it's not just one camp. It's actually a series of camps. There's over 100, I believe. And these camps, when you get there, if you're a member, you're sorted into different camps. I don't know exactly how they do this. I don't know if it's like a Harry Potter thing where they put a hat on your head and it tells you which camp you're going to. But anyway, when you become initiated, you discover which camp you're going to be placed in. And the camps have different names, such as Hillbillies, which was the camp of the Bush family. The Mandalay camp, which is supposed to be like the biggest, fanciest camp of them all for the most elite members. Then there's Cavemen, which is the camp that Nixon belonged to, and Owl's Nest, and Idlewild, and a bunch of other ones. But those are just a handful of the names of some of the camps in Bohemian Grove. Now, of course, the camp is staffed, and it's not staffed by members, it's staffed by workers, just regular old workers. They call these the camp valets, and the camp valets are assigned to and responsible for carrying the individual camps on the premises. The head valets would be like the general manager of a resort hotel. They're expected to see to the every need of all of the members. And although club membership is strictly only for men, some female workers are included in the service staff, but their presence at the Grove is limited only to daylight hours, and they are only allowed in the central areas close to the main gate. They're not allowed to go into the actual camps. The male workers could be housed at the Grove within the boundaries of the camp to which they're assigned or nearby it, but high-status workers stay in small private quarters. Other workers just stay in basic bunkhouses. So those are the facts. Nobody disagrees that this is a real place. Nobody disagrees that some of the most powerful men in the world, including former presidents and future presidents, lead financial men, people who are in charge of big businesses, billionaires, leaders from around the world, prime ministers from other countries, they all may be members or at least invited guests of Bohemian Grove. Nobody denies this. They also don't deny that the symbol of their club is an owl. Of course, conspiracy theorists point out that the owl is a symbol of the New World Order and that you can find it strangely hiding on the back of a $1 bill. And all sorts of other rumors about what this owl really represents, including when you see people holding a circle over their eye, like the OK sign, celebrities and stuff over their eye. That's a symbol of the owl. And their conspiracy theorists will basically tell you this is a branch of the Illuminati or the Bilderberg Group or the Trilateral Commission, and that all these things are actually related. We're going to get into exactly what they think in a moment, but that leads me to one of the problems I had in preparing for this episode because, I try to present the facts like I just did, right? And a lot of what you find on the internet about Bohemian Grove is actually written on conspiracy websites or far-right websites, though maybe not the most reputable places, right? So it's kind of hard to say exactly what's true, what's not true. However, there are some people who have infiltrated these encampments. And one of those people is Alex Jones. Now, if you don't know who Alex Jones is, he's a big blowhard kind of guy, and he's definitely what you would call a conspiracy theorist. He's got his own radio show. He's got, he's all over the internet. He's always yelling about basically every conspiracy that you can think of, he's into. He's super into it. He also sells a bunch of products. You might have seen John Oliver talk about him on his show and all the products that he sells. He did a great job talking about him there. I'm pretty sure that in Alex Jones we have a good candidate for the Garbage Person Hall of Fame. I'm not 100% convinced, because one of the things that makes you a garbage person, in my mind, is if you're knowingly lying to exploit and cash money in on a situation or whatever. I'm not 100% sure that Alex Jones doesn't believe everything that he says. If he actually believes it, then he might not technically qualify as a garbage person. On the other hand, he is hawking all this nonsense product, and in my opinion, and that could qualify him as a garbage person. So think on that with me, Spookaroos, and we'll discuss it together and figure out if he deserves a nod in the Garbage Person Hall of Fame. In any event, in the year 2000, when he was 26 years old, he infiltrated this summer encampment of the Bohemian Grove. Now, he had heard about the so-called human sacrifice, which even he admits is not really supposed to be a human sacrifice. Sorry, you got all excited. Not exactly what the story's about. They burn an effigy of a person, supposedly made up of oil-soaked rags, right? And they do it in front of I've heard some people say 30 feet tall. I've heard some people say 40 feet tall. Alex Jones says 45 feet tall. Anyway, a giant statue of an owl. Now, Alex Jones says, well, I know what this is. This is Moloch. This is an ancient demon god from the olden times and Babylonian times and everything. This is Moloch, or Malik as he calls him, and he was a god, and you'd sacrifice babies. He was an owl head god, and you'd put them in there like a kiln basically, and you'd put the babies in there and they'd burn, and this was a sacrifice. And the Bible tells us specifically not to do this, so we know this was a real thing. This Malik. Well, okay. First of all, I say Moloch. There are different acceptable pronunciations. I say Moloch. Moloch was actually a bull-headed figure, and he was for the sacrificing of children. That is true, and they did burn him, burn the people. However, whenever Alex Jones talks about this, and also when he talks about druids, which he does a lot, the thing you have to keep in mind is the story of these people was written by their enemy. So they might not understand all the things that these people did, and they might say, oh, this is clearly sacrifice, or who knows what. I'm just pointing that out. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying let's all look at it with a little bit of a grain of salt, okay? Now, he seems obsessed with this idea because he actually made a documentary, and you can find it on YouTube, and I will put a link to it on my website. But Alex, if you type in Alex Jones Bohemian Grove, you will find it. No problem. And he captured what they call the cremation of care, which we're going to get into a lot in just a little bit. But this is the ceremony where they burn the effigy. But the whole time before he actually gets into the grove, he's walking around this California town, Monterey, and interviewing people about Bohemian Grove and asking their opinion and saying, well, what do you think about them? Well, they say it's an effigy, but who knows? And he kind of vaguely says and hints that, maybe it's not really an effigy, but maybe it's really a human being that they are sacrificing, and they're just trying to cover it up by saying it's an effigy. Okay, Alex. All right. Well, okay. I watched his documentary, and I took some notes. So, let me just run down some of the things that he says. Also, I want to point out he repeatedly says in the footage that he's 26 years old. Like, he keeps saying it like it might be a lie, and he's just trying to get it through. If he is 26 years old, he's kind of an old-looking 26. He looks to be a middle-aged man even when he was 26. To be fair, he doesn't look that much different now, so I guess he aged well, but I guess he also aged young. So, and anyway, I don't like to comment too much on people's appearances. I got my own issues, but still, I'm just saying. Now, he will tell you, and he implies, that the Bohemian Club is a front for the New World Order. It's for powerful people so that they can gather together and plot how to control the world. He says that all powerful people throughout history have been obsessed with the occult, and that these Bohemians are no different, again, talking about Moloch and the sacrifice and all this kind of thing. Now, he says that even an atheist should be concerned. Just thought that was a strange little dig he took at atheists, that atheists don't care about people plotting to control the world for some reason, I guess. I don't know. Unnecessary dig, Alex Jones. Go fuck yourself. But anyway, we'll continue. He claims that the members of Bohemian Grove practice bizarre, ancient, Canaanite, Babylonian mystic religion, that they worship a 40-foot stone owl. Now, of course, when he talks about Moloch, he does show pictures here of, drawings of what Moloch is supposed to be. But strangely, he does not zoom up on their head. He only shows the part where it looks, like the kiln, like I said, where they're putting people into the fire. But he doesn't go up on the head. Why not? Because the pictures clearly show a bull head, not an owl head, which is what he wants you to think. Anyway, he talks about their sickening behavior and their mock human sacrifices. And he says that it's the sacrifices and all that kind of stuff. It's because the powerful have to get off in a sick way. And get off is a term he uses multiple times in this documentary. He basically just says this is it. This is how they get their kicks, how they get their rocks off. This is how they get off. He also says that people in power are forced to go to Bohemian Grove, possibly even against their will. So they might not really want to go, but they're forced to go once they get some kind of power in the world. They say, okay, you want power? This is the deal. You got to come down to Bohemian Grove. Now, why he thinks this is true, we'll get into in just a little bit. Now, as I said, he makes a huge deal about the owl. Again, he's not alone in this. Conspiracy theorists are all over owls. They hate owls. They assume anybody with an owl figurine is some kind of Illuminati member, and that they worship owls. I don't have one yet. I don't think I have any. I'm looking around my room now. I don't think I have any owl motifs around here. I think I have to get one now, just out of spite. I think we should all get owl figurines. Anyway, as I said, he's really stuck on this idea of human sacrifice and, what kind of a religion practices human sacrifice, and this is evil, bizarre, occult worship, blah, 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 blah. Well, Alex Jones, I was raised in a religion where every Sunday a priest gave us what he told us was the body of Christ, and we had to eat it, and then we also had to drink some of his blood because he had sacrificed himself. Just saying. He then has on a so-called expert who claims that this particular ceremony, the cremation of care, had to be plotted out by an actual occultist with a very deep, deep knowledge of the occult. There's no way it wasn't. And when someone asks Alex why he thinks that they would do this, why they would perform human sacrifice or mock human sacrifice, and why they would meet in these cabals and perform these other strange rituals that they might do, his answer again is that, well, they get off on it. They enjoy being bad little boys. But I will slightly commend Alex Jones on something. He says, first of all, that the reason he's doing this is because if there's human sacrifice going on, if they're sacrificing children, this has to be investigated. Well, yes. But then he also admits that he's thrilled and to be there and that he's seeking adventure. Now, this is something... I think this is really the reason he's doing it, and also to hoist his own fame. Again, we can debate whether or not he actually believes the things that he talks about. He did recently admit that what he does is a character, although he'd probably tell you that was to avoid a lawsuit. I don't know the exact details on all that stuff, so I don't want to comment too much on it. But whenever I see these ghost shows and stuff like that, where there's people going out ghost hunting and everything, and they're like, we're doing this for science, we're doing it for, blah, blah, blah. And I can't help but think, no, that's not, maybe you really believe this stuff, but I think deep down you want an adventure with your friends and you want maybe some notoriety for yourself. So I do commend Alex Jones at least a tiny, tiny bit for being willing to admit that partially. But as far as his theory about them sacrificing children secretly, I do think the town of Monterey, California might have noticed if some of their children go missing every July. None of the locals mention that they've had that problem when he talks to them, so I'm going to guess that's not exactly what's happening. He also mentions that they hold weird sex orgies, and then he says, quote, "It's pretty well documented." Actually, it's not quite. It's not quite pretty well documented. There are some strange things, which we are going to talk about, but it's not well documented. Then later in the film, he does mention, I said before, that he feels that some people, politicians and what have you, power brokers of the world, might be forced to go. And why would they be forced to go? The reason for this, he says, is because they're going to go to this camp where everybody's behaving badly, doing drugs, satanic worshipping, or at least Moloch worshipping, weird, strange rituals, and these wild orgies. Now, when these powerful people go to these things, his theory is that somebody's watching, somebody's recording, if not actually recording, at least, keeping track of what's going on, who's there, all that kind of thing, so that in the future, if the power brokers have a problem with this person, or if this person gets a little bit out of line, they can say, "Hey, weren't you at Bohemian Grove, about 11 years back? And didn't you hook up with a senator from New York at that time and have a weird gay romp at that time? And aren't these pictures of that?" Or something along those lines. Or, "Isn't this you in druid robes carrying a torch and burning somebody? Or at least an effigy?" Or it could be maybe nothing even that salacious. It could just be, if you're in a loose environment with the guys, you might let things slip that you wouldn't normally let slip, and then they can use that information against you sometime in the future. Now, Alex makes a point here that a lot of conspiracy theorists will make, and he says that people are preconditioned to believe that certain things aren't true. And then if other people talk about those things, conspiracies or whatnot, you're preconditioned to think that those people are nuts. Right? So if you think Alex Jones is nuts, what it means is you're not paying attention, you're not awake, it's your fault. Well, in that case, thank the Lord for our Savior, Alex Jones, finally telling us the truth. Now, he did infiltrate Bohemian Grove, and the way he did it, actually, was basically he just dressed like a rich white guy, going out to the country, going out to the mountains for the weekend, and walked right in through the front gate and just pretended like he belonged there. And if anyone asked where he was from, he would tell them that he was with the Hillbillies camp because he already had the Texas accent, so he thought that, he might fit in well there. Now, Alex Jones did not spend an inordinate amount of time at the camp, but he did secretly film some things, and you can see his footage. It's mostly shots of middle-aged men in khakis, like butt shots of them. But he does also film the cremation of care, which we're going to discuss in depth. I'm going to take you through it beat by beat, because the footage is out there on YouTube, but it's a little bit hard to watch, to be honest with you, because he is filming it secretly with a little spy camera that was tucked in his bag, I guess. So with that said, let's go inside Bohemian Grove during their midsummer encampment with Alex Jones. Now, the first thing you hear when you walk into the camp is bagpipe music. And you see a bunch of old white guys sitting around outside of cabins. Now, you see Alex Jones walk into what's maybe a lodge or a restaurant, and there's very clearly female voices. So I guess this is the female staff that we might have heard about only being allowed during daylight hours. He then walks by a sign, a big sign kind of between two trees that has a skull on it, and he makes a big deal about this. He didn't film it very well. His camera was kind of like upside down or at an angle at that point, so you can't really get a very good look at it, but he says it's a big skull. And then there's some French writing on the sign, and it's hard to read, so I'm not sure I got it right. But I think what it said was, "I am the girl," but it was in French. He doesn't mention what the writing may have said, which I thought was a little surprising, actually. because of, his theories about what everything means. He just focused on the skull and was like, oh, this is a skull, look at this. This is occultic. This is how you know what they're really into. He then walks into a bar area, and you can hear a shitty cover band playing Chantilly Lace. You know that song, the Big Bopper? Chantilly lace and a pretty face, a ponytail hanging down. That song is playing. So far, I am not impressed with the soundtrack at Bohemian Grove, and I gotta say, for the rest of the movie, I'm not impressed with it either. Just get that out there. It was only made in 2000. It's not too long ago. They had, music back then. He also says that they were given a program which was just for noobs. And the program on the cover had a little picture of a demon named PJ. Now, he does show this picture, and it actually looks like a bug to me. A little bug sweeping up some dust or something on the corner. I don't know. Then there's a picture of the cremation of care ceremony, and he says, if you look at this picture, if we zoom in here, you can see a corpse burning. And I asked a professional in anatomy, and he said that, as far as the size of this thing goes, you can tell by the size of it that this is the corpse of a child, and these are its hands, and this is its head. And if you squint and look hard enough, you can see what he's talking about. Of course, it could also just be a shrub that was in the foreground. But you be the judge. All right, let's get into it. The cremation of care. This is the big event that every conspiracy theorist talks about. It's not the only event that happens during the encampment. There's actually a ton of events, but this is the one that everybody talks about. So what is the cremation of care? Well, according to the Bohemian Club, it is an actual thing that they do. Yes, they dress in robes. Yes, they have an effigy of a person who they call Mr. Dull Care. This person is brought to an altar, and it is burned in effigy. And they say that this is the opening of the weekend because they are destroying the dull cares of the world for the time of the encampment, which is 2 weeks long, by the way. So this is the first Sunday of the encampment. So they burn the cares away, knowing, as the ritual says, that it will return once they leave camp. But at least for now, they're going to get rid of all the cares of the world and just be free to be themselves in amongst their brothers in the Bohemian Club and their honored guests. That's what the Bohemian Club says. Of course, Alex Jones thinks this is an actual ritual, and he even suspects it's not an effigy, but a real person being sacrificed. So now, as I said, I'm going to take you through the actual ritual, the cremation of care. The first thing that happens is that the Bohemians gather on each side of the lake. Under the owl statue, there is a stage with an altar. An eternal flame burns from a lantern on the altar. Alex Jones describes it as being an Aladdin-type lamp where the flame sticks out. A hearse approaches with passengers wearing black and brown robes, bearing a bound body, as Alex says, or the effigy, depending on which you believe. There's more bagpipe music playing. Then, pre-recorded somber violins take over, and the men in robes take the body behind some curtains as Grovers applaud. Now, Alex says he didn't know what they were applauding about, and he couldn't see what was happening because it was behind the curtains. But this is where he speculates that there is an actual human who is being murdered behind the curtains. 10 minutes later, more robed figures approach the owl statue, and they bring forth the body from behind the curtain. What appears to be a white-robed priest then welcomes everyone and encourages them to leave their cares behind and celebrate the beauty of nature and the friends around them. He asks them to remember former members who have passed on. Organ music then plays, followed by a very loud funeral march. The priest announces that Dull Care has been slain, and his body shall be burned in a funeral pyre. Then they play a song, another pre-recorded song that sounds at first like the theme to the Little Rascals, and then it kind of sounds like the theme to the Universal Frankenstein movie. It's weird how it goes back and forth like that. But in any event, it's another old-timey sounding recording that they're doing. A boatman, with his face painted like a skull, carries the effigy across the lake to the altar. The priest calls for fire, and trumpets play as it is brought forth. But then, a very loud and a very evil-sounding laugh is heard through the speakers. This is also pre-recorded. And the voice says, "Fools, when will you learn that ye cannot slay me?" He then goes on to say that you cannot kill the cares of the world, for they will be waiting for you when you leave the grove. And every year you try to burn me, and every year I come back. The priest then says, yes, this is true, and we understand that the cares of the world will get to us, and you might even destroy some of us, and some of us might even conquer you out there in the real world. But whatever that case may be for the future, right now, here in the grove, we can at least rid you from the camp. Care says that he can't be burned with the torches which were brought from the regions where he reigns, and they will not burn him. He says he spits upon their fire, and a small pyro effect goes off. At this point, I guess the other fires go out. I didn't see that on the video, but I've read that in other summations. So the priest turns and asks the owl statue what to do. Now this is where the owl statue sings a song in a rich baritone voice. And I'm going to play, again, sorry the sound quality isn't great, but this is from the hidden video camera. I'm going to play just a little bit of the owl singing for you. And this may or may not be the voice of Walter Cronkite, Bohemian Grove member. Not the greatest song ever written, but I suppose it wasn't written for pop charts. It was never going to be a Billboard hit. The point, in case you missed it, the point that the owl is trying to make is that they can't use outside flames. That's true. They have to use a flame from the eternal flame of fellowship, or whatever they call it, on the altar there. That one we talked about earlier coming out of the Aladdin lamp. So they light the torch with that, and of course that does the trick. They then light the effigy on fire, and the priest says a few words, and you hear screams from Dull Care, who's being burned. This is actually the part of the recording you heard at the very beginning of the show. So now they are set free for their midsummer revelry. At this point, small pyrotechnics go off all around the lake, and the song In the Hall of the Mountain King begins to play. Then big fireworks go off. Again, super unimpressed with your soundtrack, folks. You're supposed to be like a secret badass cult, and this is the music you have? I'm just saying, if you need a music director, or you need someone to come in who can give you a little bit more theatricality, I can help you out with that. For a price. That's the end of the ritual. And Jones, of course, has a few parting words for us. He tells us that during the ritual, the priest claimed that they were going to read the future from the burnt remains of Mr. Dullcare. That's not exactly what they say. They just say, in your smoke, we see that we are free to, begin our revelry, which is not exactly the same thing as what Mr. Jones says. Then he also, again, goes back to the fact that he thinks this effigy could actually be a real person. He says that there's been a lot of, quote, strange goings-on in this area of the country. And then he says, they'll play it off like this is not a big thing, that this is a joke. People will say that this is a joke. It's just some kind of little silly play that they do to, symbolize that they're getting rid of their cares. But it's deadly serious. It's deadly serious. to them performing it, and it's deadly serious to us who aren't in the cabal. He then says he's going to go confront George Bush, which amounts to him yelling in a microphone from across the street with a guy wearing a George Bush mask and a black robe, holding up a sign that says Bush practices a cult. Okay, if that's confronting George Bush, okay, I guess he did it. That's the end of his documentary. But actually, there are many people who have tried to infiltrate Bohemian Grove, and there's many articles written about it. But the first one came out all the way back in 1989 in a magazine called Spy Magazine. Now, I'm going to break down exactly what this article says, so you don't have to read the whole thing, although I will make a link to it available on the website, spookyas.com. So you could read the whole thing if you wanted to, but I'm going to take you through the important bits. First of all, it was written by a guy named Philip Weiss, and he mentions that he got in through the help of an activist, an anti-Bohemian Grove activist, who we're going to learn a little bit about later on. But he also mentions some interesting facts. He says that membership for initiation to be a voting member of the Bohemian Grove Club at the time was $8,500. I've seen more recent figures saying that actually cost $25,000 to become a full member, unless, of course, you are a man of talent, and then you get a reduced fee. The yearly club dues back in 1989 were $2,000, and again, these days I hear it's actually $5,000 per year now. Now, being a member and paying your yearly dues, that does not entitle you to camp on site. That camping on site costs another $850 in 1989, or just under $2,000 these days. Now, Philip Weiss says that despite all these reports about security and all that stuff, he was going to go in with the help of that activist that I told you about and that we're going to learn a little bit more about later on, through kind of what he describes as an underground railroad of networks through the forest to get up to the camp and then just kind of pretend like he belonged there. It turns out none of that was necessary. Just like Alex Jones did, he basically just walked right in. And he also just pretended that he belonged there. Now, his visit was a little bit more successful than Jones. He didn't just stay a couple hours. He stayed for a full 6 or 7 days. I forget exactly what he said, but he stayed long. And he describes the camp in this way. He says that at 7 a.m., they served gin fizzies. All right, that's how they started their day. And then he said basically there was a lot of speeches, a lot of drinking, a lot of elaborate drag shows, a lot of skinny dipping, a lot of skeet shooting, domino playing, live music, bird watching, nature hikes, comics, singers, and actors. He also describes some of the shows. Now, he was only there a few days. He didn't get the full 2-week experience, but he described he did see what they call the low jinks. There's high jinks and low jinks. Get it? And the low jinks is a comedy show. The high jinks is supposed to be more of a drama. So the low jinks he describes as basically a really lame comedy sketch show featuring men in drag. And the quote from the article says, "The girls were all played by men, and every time they appeared, their chunky legs and flashed buttocks highly visible through their tight support hose. The crowd went wild." And he gave an example of the type of jokes you might hear in the show. He said this is one of the jokes that was in the show. Quote, "My father said if you have a choice between an angry woman and a rabid dog, take the dog. It's already got a fur coat, and the license is a lot cheaper." He goes on to say, quote, "The mood is reminiscent of high school. There's no end to the pee-pee and penis jokes, suggesting that these men, advanced in so many other ways, were emotionally arrested sometime during adolescence." And another thing that a lot of talk has been made about Bohemian Grove, it appears in many articles about it, is the peeing. And again, I want to quote directly from the article on this. He says, quote, "The peeing is ceaseless and more than a little exhibitionistic. Everybody talks about it. Bohemians reminisce and describes such bizarre initiation rites as escorting new members out to the redwood, at which one of the founders did his morning ablutions. The owl hoots, which are poster-sized cartoons, they are racked up each day near the campfire circle, and they are all filled with pissing pictures. He goes on to say that Reagan arrived late at the camp, and on his second day there, he gave a speech. He did get to meet Reagan briefly. And then he said that the men were often nude, and they talked about penises a lot. He said not all Bohemians are gay. In fact, when he was with a valet at one point, the valet said that there was a bar in town that would have several call girls available if he wished. Now, the reporter had not asked for this information in any way. The valet just gave it to him. And the reporter also goes on to say that he thinks that this was set up by the FBI. Now, whether this is something like Alex Jones was talking about, where they're trying to catch you doing something so they can use it against you later, or maybe the FBI member was just a member of Bohemian Grove who said, hey, I have ins and I can make this available for my fellow bohos, as they call themselves. He says that gay sex was clearly happening in the Grove as well, however. And to quote the article, he says, today, AIDS has put a damper on the Grove's River Road pickup scene, but just the same, a man on his own often gets invited back to the camps by gay bohemians. He too comments on the cremation of care ceremony, citing it as one of the main reasons that people have a problem with the Bohemian Club. I'm going to quote directly from the article again. Quote, one reason for the Bohemian Club's poor public relations is the name given to the yearly opening ceremony, the cremation of care. The cremation is intended to put the busy men of the club at ease and banish the stress of the outside world. But it arouses critics of the encampment because they interpret it to mean that the Bohemians literally don't care about the outside world. The cremation of care, they fear, means the death of caring. Demonstrations outside the Grove a few years back often centered around the resurrection of care. Now he goes on to mention that the main priest at this time wore a pink and green satin costume, and that there were men dressed as fairies standing before a redwood tree in gold-spangled bodysuits dripping with rhinestones. This is not apparent on the video shot by Alex Jones, but again, it's not the most quality video, so who knows. And he also says that they spoke of fairies that would free the men to pursue warm fellowship. He says that there are many speeches given throughout the days there. There's one always every day at 12:30. There's a guest speaker, and he says that these speakers inevitably, even though the motto of the club, I meant to mention this earlier, is weaving spiders come not here. Now, different people take that to mean different things, but what the club says it means is leave your work outside. You're not coming to make plans or do anything like that. You're just coming here to relax and have a good time with your friends. Now, he says that although that is one of the rules of the club, that you're not supposed to talk shop, you're not supposed to talk politics and all that kind of stuff, that's basically all anybody seems to talk about. And that when these people give their speeches, they're usually some kind of political motivation, and they're looking for support some kind from these powerful and wealthy people. He also states that the Bohemian Grove is very easy to hate because it's mostly a Republican convention, right? He describes it as, quote, a dense concentration of extravagant war and money mongers. It's easy to object. It's an easy object of protest. And eventually 72 left-wing groups joined with this woman that we spoke about earlier. Her name is Mary Moore. She was one of the co-founders of the Bohemian Grove Action Network. And these are people that would go out and protest. They might still be up to it. I'm sure there's people out there that are up to it. But she was basically like an old hippie, I guess, who at the time was trying to help bring down Bohemian Grove. Now, Alex Jones mentions this article, but he says that this article is the cover story. He's saying that they put this out in Spy Magazine, the Illuminati or whoever runs the world. They put this out in Spy Magazine so that people would think, well, yes, it's real, and yes, they do these weird rituals, but it's just a bunch of rich assholes going out there having a good time, engaging in naughty sex and, drugs and other vices. But it's really just a good old boys club. It's nothing to worry about. And he says, of course, no, that's not true. They're performing these occult rituals, and they might be in league with the devil, and they're trying to take over the world and all this kind of stuff. And they are the weaving spiders and whatever else you may say about them. As I mentioned, there have been other reports on the story. There was a big article in the New York Post with a big picture of a gay porn star, with certain areas blocked out, of course. But the cover of the story seemed to imply that this gay porn star was at the club servicing the members there. Actually, he worked there as a valet, and at no point in the article does he or anybody else state that he performed any kind of sex acts while he was at the club. But allegedly, he worked there as a valet, and he actually joked around saying all these Republicans that basically are anti-equal rights for the LGBT community, if they only knew that they had a gay porn star in their midst, serving them drinks and all that. There are articles that mention that there's possible prostitutes brought up and everything, but I couldn't find any real evidence of it. So this seems like a story that's out there. Maybe true, maybe not. I don't know. But these are some of the allegations you hear leveraged against the club. If you want my personal opinion, I don't really have one. I don't really have all the information to make a really informed decision. But basically, if we're going with the most rational explanation, then it's exactly what it sounds like. Yes, basically what Alex Jones says the cover story is, that yes, this is some rich Republicans getting together and, doing perhaps unsavory things, but and maybe making some backroom deals. Those kinds of activities might go on, and those are things to be concerned about in their own right. I don't think you need to add a satanic element to it. I don't think the ritual of care is a satanic ritual or an occult ritual or has anything to do with Moloch. I think that's an invention by Alex Jones and others who are of those minds, or perhaps trying to exploit people. I think, this is just people meeting, trying to kick off a little bit, kick back a little bit, and, feel free, I guess, to be whatever they really are. Although I'm not sure that's a great thing, but I think that's probably really what it is. But let's hear what some other famous people have had to say about it. First, I have a clip for you from Bill Clinton, former president. This was during a speech he was giving in support of his wife, Hillary, when she was running for president, and he got heckled. And this is what he had to say about Bohemian Grove.
The Bohemian Club, as you say, the Bohemian Club? That's where all those rich Republicans go up and stand naked against redwood trees, right? I've never been to the Bohemian Club, but you ought to go. It'd be good for you. Get some fresh air.
So as you heard, Clinton claims to have not ever been to the Bohemian Club, Bohemian Grove. But let's hear from someone who definitely was there, because there's pictures of him there sitting right next to Ronald Reagan. I'm talking about President Nixon. Now, the picture was taken before he was president, and he actually resigned from the club sometime in the 70s, which caused a big rift in the club. But anyway, that's a story for another time. Let's hear what President Nixon. This was recorded. Those secret tapes he had in the Oval Office? This was discovered on one of those tapes. So this is a comment from while he was president of the United States. Again, the audio is maybe not the best quality, but I think the important things that he has to say about it, you'll hear loud and clear.
Let's look at Northern California. You understand? Yeah. You know what San Francisco just gone. It's clear over. I know that, but it isn't just down in the ratty part of town. But the upper class in San Francisco is that way. The Bohemian Grove that I attend, one time to time, the Easterners and the others that come there. But it is the most faggy goddamn thing you will ever imagine in San Francisco crowd, because it's just terrible. shake hands with everybody in San Francisco.
Did you catch all that? On another listening, I think maybe that is a little bit hard to understand without the subtitles. When you watch it on YouTube, there's subtitles. So let me go ahead and repeat his statement just to make sure that we're all clear on what President Nixon had to say about Bohemian Grove. He says, "It's not just the ratty part of town. The upper class in San Francisco is that way. The Bohemian Grove, which I attended from time to time, is the most faggy goddamn thing you could ever imagine with that San Francisco crowd. I can't shake hands with anybody from San Francisco." Well, what more could there possibly be to say? I think we're going to wrap up our talk about Bohemian Grove right there. I'm going to leave it for you to decide and you to look into even more. As I said, I will post a link to Alex Jones' video and maybe some other interesting things about Bohemian Grove that you can look into yourself. Please don't forget to check the website, that's spookyas.com, and find us on Facebook, facebook.com/spookyas. I'd love to be Facebook friends with all of you through the page, of course. I do not accept any friend requests from people that I don't know. That's a policy I've always had and probably always will. Until next time, spookaroos, careful in those redwood forests, but don't be afraid.